Here's an idea. The terrifying nature of face swaps gives us insight into what it's like to be a computer. A couple weeks ago, I was lucky enough to hang out with Wheezy Waiter when he was visiting New York. He said, before we part ways, you have to be in today's vlog. I'm not gonna tell you why, but it's gonna be really good. He set up his camera, and then this happened.
Hi, I'm Mike Rugnetta.
Hey, I'm Wheezy Waiter. Like any self-respecting internet professional, I've swapped faces with some friends, but this doppel swap got me really thinking about the technology surrounding face swapping, specifically the really bizarre and often hilarious horror of it. In case you haven't had the swap pleasure, face swapping requires a particular kind of software, like Faceswap Live, the app used in the recent Faceswap challenge making its way around YouTube, a Belarusian app called Masquerade, which was just purchased by Facebook, or Snapchat. In general, face swapping is not new. Clever meme lords have used a similar Photoshop technique for years. Our face swap has turned into a sea of Snapchat-like swaps, but a dip into the archives from 2013 reveals swaps of a much different variety. I would also argue that sleeve face, a joke that predates the internet, is another predecessor to face swapping. There's a degree to which none of these are about people, but about images of people. The face becomes available information, adapted to some novel use. In the way everything printed adopts the materiality of paper, everything digitized adopts the materiality of digital objects. Except digital materiality is complicated and faces are, you know, faces. They're the home of identity, the metonym for one's values, reputation, and personality. The use of face to mean one's character originated in the Chinese language and is traceable through Japanese and eventually to many other languages, including English. In the early 90s, lexicographer Michael Carr determined that face and countenance words were semantically extended to 98 common expressions for prestige, honor, or reputation in Chinese and 89 in Japanese. These phrases translate to English as things like struggling for face, borrowing face, tearing up face, and having no face. Carr points out that English has only 5 such common expressions: lose face, save face, both with and without a hyphen, face saving, and face saver. Which is to say, though we may have fewer expressions for it in English, there is ample evidence that humans experience the face as a social and cultural symbol for the physical self, the metaphysical self, and a unity between the two experienced by both owner and observer. Lakoff and Johnson call this the face for the person in their book Metaphors We Live By. They write that it's, quote, not merely a matter of language. In our culture, we look at a person's face rather than his posture or his movements to get our basic information about what the person is like. This goes well beyond the superficial and works because, broadly speaking, faces are unique to their wearer, easily identifiable, unlike a fingerprint, and fixed. Barring lasers and a robot vacuum arm, you and your pals aren't gonna switch faces until, well, this. What I wonder is if any of this can help explain a common reaction that people have when they swap faces or they see their friends swapping faces.
This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Oh. This is horrifying.
My
The
God.
most terrifying.
Wait.
That is horrible.
Oh my God, I look like Ted Cruz.
There really is, I think, an aspect of horror to all of this, body horror specifically, an art horror genre with many practitioners across lots of media, but which for many people is exemplified by the work of director David Cronenberg in his films like The Fly, Scanners, Existenz, and Videodrome. Body horror can be, but isn't necessarily gruesome. It is, however, always uncomfortable.
That's disgusting.
In his paper Mutations and Metamorphoses, Ronald Allen Lopez Cruz argues that body horror is, quote, characterized by the manipulation and warping of the normal state of bodily form and function, and that the fear that's present in body horrific works is, quote, not of death, but of one's own body and its potential destruction. Body horrific destruction isn't necessarily fatal, but it does transgress the human body's normal function. This destruction is not always total, but it is usually structural. Face swapping similarly isn't gruesome, but it's not unsettling. It's a weirdly literal, perhaps horrific, borrowing of face, all too appropriately powered by the technology that we use to socialize, to put in FaceTime, often to build our reputations. Speaking with City Paper, digital dualism coiner and Snapchat researcher Nathan Jurgensen called Cronenberg's Videodrome the best movie about social media. He says, quote, "It's bodies and humanity being merged and enmeshed and imploded with technology and media signal, not separate but mixed and augmented." There's a degree to which your normal run-of-the-mill face swap exemplifies this. And then there's another kind of face swap which does so doubly, all while channeling another, different, and much more vast kind of horror.
Oh God, what's happening?
Occasionally, the face swap algorithm may suffer a kind of technological pareidolia, which is the perception of a familiar pattern of something where none actually exists. Technically, it's a psychological phenomenon where we, people with, psyches, see shapes in clouds, horse heads in nebulas, Jesus in toast, and faces in everything. A combination of our neurological visual processing equipment, memory, and imagination assemble randomly arranged individual shapes into a meaningful gestalt. Programmatically, this is pretty similar to how computerized facial recognition works. Programs are taught and can sometimes learn, roughly speaking, what shapes and arrangement of those shapes create a face. But ultimately they lack human judgment. You've probably never worried about the little man trapped in the surface of your wall, for example. So they can get fooled, let's say. Algorithms will sometimes mistake inanimate objects for the foremost biological expression of social identity, the face. In a piece for New York Magazine, Brian Feldman wagers that these face swaps, which display a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be human, to possess an identity, may assuage some of our anxiety about the growing intelligence of machines. He writes, "It can be a relief to know that even though code is just a complex set of step-by-step instructions, it's still in some way fallible. It cannot yet fully approximate human technique and appearance." I would argue that the opposite is true. It's not comforting to know that machines are fallible, but rather vexing and obscurely terrifying to know what exactly their algorithms think of us, what they think about our bodies, the visual construction of our identities, and what we perceive as a deep and fundamental connection between those two things. They think nothing about those things. Nothing at all. Your face is now a tire rim. Tire rims are now faces. Whatever. This insight is not body horrific, but cosmically horrific, positively Lovecraftian. In his book Weird Realism, philosopher Graham Harman describes Lovecraft as a writer who understands the horror of gaps, specifically the gaps between what things appear to be and what they truly are. Characters in Lovecraftian horror constantly struggle to perceive and describe what they behold. The truth and the subjects of those experiences retreat from all manner of human comprehension, often resulting in or equating with madness. Similarly, as one of Harman's colleagues, Ian Bogost, points out in his book Alien Phenomenology, it's difficult, if not impossible, to comprehend what it's like to be a thing, a coffee mug, a government, a mobile phone app. Why we may or may not want that knowledge is the subject of some debate, so I'll put some links in the doobly-doo, but either way, when or if we gain insight into the experiences of things, we're confronted with those Lovecraftian gaps. We may see that there's a mode of experience completely unlike our own. Unlike any sense of the word experience that we have, and rather impossible to describe. We're shown the space between reality as we perceive it and reality in some as it may actually be. So maybe one reason glitched swaps are terrifying is that we're shown just for a moment what it's like to be an app or a program or an algorithm. We're given a glimpse, if even a minuscule and metaphoric one, into the experiences of machine kind, divorced from and disinterested in all of this human nonsense, disregarding and misunderstanding, or perhaps just plain not caring, about the physical parts that comprise humans, often considered the only agents, or the most important of a very few, capable of having experiences worth considering. Confronting the experiences of things may be horrifying in the way Lovecraft often is, a horror that's vague and incomprehensible, and more unsettling than it is physically dangerous or gruesome. With this as our starting point, then, it would make sense that different machines, algorithms, apps have different experiences, see us differently. So we might look for other insight regarding the viewership of humanity through the eyes of code and ask if it too produces some cosmic horror. I think there is, and I think that we would be hard-pressed to find an example more fitting than Google's Deep Dream. Deep Dream was designed to recognize and categorize photos of faces. Images run through Deep Dream can have the patterns which are recognized in them enhanced and printed back onto the image in a way. If an image is passed through Deep Dream, enhanced and reprinted over and over again, meaningfulness is not extracted from, but brought to that image by the algorithm. That meaningfulness is shaped by Deep Dream's focus: faces. Photos turn from mundane to hallucinogenic, often vaguely upsetting collages of human, animal, and fish faces, all set against a busy Alex Grey-esque backdrop. For me, Deep Dream's output sits at the intersection of body horror, cosmic horror, and cyberpunk dystopia. It exhibits a misunderstanding, a quote, total disregard for and ignorance of the human body, as Philip Brophy describes John Carpenter's The Thing. It does so as an effect of its own perspective, a human-made algorithm obsessed with faces while simultaneously knowing next to nothing about them. Or really knowing an impossible amount, but the type of knowledge impossible to comprehend by anyone with a face. Deep Dream is an algorithm which uses bodies, images of them, without the inconvenience of ever needing to have one. Unlike pareidolia face swaps, I rarely laugh at the results of Deep Dream's reiterative process. I grimace, maybe sweat a little, because it's unsettling. I mean, look at this. But also because I can imagine, but just barely, that this is how a computer sees me. And that's a little horrifying.
This is horrifying.
What do y'all think? Is there a horror to face swaps? And how does it relate to body horror or cosmic horror? Let us know in the comments and I will respond to some of them in next week's comment response video. In this week's comment response video, we talk about your thoughts regarding violence as the removal of choice. If you want to watch that one, you can click here or find a link in the doobly-doo. I'm sorry that we have to do it just immediately after my allergies have set in and I sound like I have cotton balls stuck in my nose. It's not fun on this side of the camera either. Also, you might have noticed the brand new Idea Channel t-shirt that I was wearing for most of this episode. If you want to check that one out or buy it, you can go to dftba.com, find a link in the doobly-doo, or we'll put a card way over there because I'm currently in a tiny box. It's over that way, yonder. We're gonna be at VidCon next month. I'm gonna be moderating 2 panels, one about the education space and one about Doctor Who. So if you're there, come say hi. We're probably gonna do some meetups. PBS Digital Studios is gonna have a chill lounge with all kinds of Idea Channel stuff. There are gonna be host and creator bookshelves, so you're gonna get to see some books that we chose. It's gonna be a great time. Also, speaking of Digital Studios, today, so Wednesday, but then also I guess that means 24 hours from now, on the Digital Studios Snapchat, which we'll put the little Snapchat ghosty linky thing, you know, somewhere around here. I'm gonna be giving a tour of the new set that we have built for Idea Channel, sort of talking about some of the things that are on the shelves, talking about some of the books, some of how it got put together. And then on Friday of this week, we're gonna be releasing a video that is a short conversation with me and my friend James, who designed and built the set, about the process, how it came together, how he didn't want me to get rid of the record wall, even though I really, really wanted to. So you can thank him for that. So PBS Digital Studio Snapchat tour of the new set, and on Friday, an interview with my friend James. And then next Friday, we're gonna be doing a short video that explains how you can win a postmodernism hat. One of these. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit, links in the doobly-doo. The tweet of the week comes from Matt UD2, who points us towards a really interesting and somewhat lengthy panel discussion between some journalists and some people who are involved in the Occupy movement about the legitimate uses of violence as a tactic for protest. And it's not only a really interesting conversation in and of itself, but it's also, I think, a really great, an interesting format for having people who in some way fundamentally disagree with one another talk through their ideas and their disagreements. And if you don't want to watch the whole thing, that's great, but I would suggest at least watching the first 7 or so minutes just for the setup of the conversation itself. It's just, I wish that there were more things like this in the world. And last but certainly not least, this week's episode would not have been possible or good without the very hard work of these things. Allergy medicine is making me feel crazy.